Amigos, ahora tenemos el placer de poder platicar con Gabriel Solomon. Él es director de Relaciones Gubernamentales y con la industria para América Latina de Ericsson. Y bueno, muchas gracias. Thank you for this interview, Gabriel.
It's a pleasure. Good to be here.
So tell us a little about what Ericsson is doing here at the conference. What's the role you're playing?
Ericsson's here basically to demonstrate that we are a leader in 5G and the importance of 5G for the economy and for society. Since 2015, our radio equipment has been 5G ready. We've shipped 3 million 5G ready radios, which means for operators that have our equipment, they can turn on 5G with a switch of software. And this enables national deployment of 5G very quickly. And so in Mexico, all we need now is for the spectrum to become available.
So why is 5G so important?
5G is the bedrock of future competitiveness. If you look at early 5G adopters and leaders, they're doing it because they see that the industry and society needs this intelligent connectivity to drive competitiveness, to drive productivity, and to increase social cohesion.
What do you think are the main benefits that 5G is going to bring in terms of health, education, and other social goods and rights?
I think 5G will do many things. One is increase the access to health, education, and other services, but also transform the way in which these are delivered, making it more affordable, easier to achieve educational knowledge, but also you can have now remote operations where surgeons can operate remotely using the low latency enabled by 5G.
Give us a little bit more examples about how this will be enabled by 5G.
So an example of low latency is some work we've done with King's College in London. And if you imagine an orchestra, but not in one room, distributed around the world, they're all playing together at the same time, keeping the same rhythm because of the low latency enabled with 5G. And also the professor we've been working with plays the piano using a haptic glove in another country. It's quite astonishing what you can do with this technology.
And you can do that in terms of education, in terms of health.
I think you can imagine anything. If you go back 10 years, who would have thought all the services that were available on a smartphone? If you go forward 10 years, it's just going to be an incredible time to be alive.
How is Ericsson looking at the adoption of this technology in countries like China or the United States or the countries that are more involved?
Sure. Well, the United States is an early leader. China recently announced that it will do a pre-commercial trial with about 50,000 base stations. So when China goes 5G, it will go 5G incredibly large. Korea is another early adopter where we have a commercial network. And what the Koreans are doing particularly well is coordinating the 5G launch so that you have national 5G coverage from day one, which enables this ecosystem to develop very, very quickly.
How do you think this will maximize the development of a country in general?
So 5G essentially will transform the way productivity is generated across the economy. Total factor productivity, is the only one driver of growth. And so if you can get something to inflate that, the economies will boom, societies will benefit, and we'll all be better off.
So what are the conditions that are needed for this technology to be introduced in its full potential to Latin America?
So first, we need the spectrum. Second, we need the investment incentives. And here in Mexico, there's a bit of a problem because the annual spectrum fee is about 12% of revenues, which is huge and acts as a disincentive for investment. And I think increasingly many governments recognize there's a trade-off between the upfront cost of spectrum and the ability of operators to invest and deploy networks. And so really I think it's incumbent on governments to decide, do they want this connectivity to transform the economy? If so, you've got to lower those fees.
So we were talking about France's example.
Yes. So France last year, instead of re-auctioning spectrum, said to the industry, okay, what we want is pervasive connectivity everywhere. How are we going to get it? Well, we won't charge you for spectrum, but you commit to investing. And so France will be the first large country in Europe that has pervasive connectivity, which is good for public services, good for government services, and of course good for consumers.
So what are the areas of the spectrum that are going to be used by 5G and how this should be distributed or regulated by the government?
Sure. So 5G needs three types of spectrum. It needs low-band spectrum, and in Mexico, that's going to be the 600 megahertz spectrum which provides coverage. It needs millimeter wave spectrum for capacity, and it needs something in between for doing a bit of both, which is mid-band spectrum, the 3.4 to 3.8 gigahertz band. Now, in Mexico, that band needs to be refarmed, and the sooner it is, the better, I think, because then you'll get benefit from the economies of scale that the harmonized spectrum will deliver.
So once we overcome all these different difficulties there are for the complete adoption of 5G and also the complete coverage of connectivity, there's another type of this setback, that is education and ways of telling people what to do with all this potential. How does Ericsson look at this problem?
Well, we are a very big believer in investing in digital skills, and not only for the youth, but also for the adults and the aging population. And I think once technology is in these people's hands, it becomes very, very easy to use. So it's more about helping educate, showing the value, and one of the key levers that governments have used is to put public services online. And this means that if citizens want to interact with the government, they have to kind of learn how to do so through a digital channel.
What would be your recommendation for other instances to also tackle this problem?
I think it comes down to, is there a commitment from the government at the highest level to make this a priority? If it is, then you can get the investments incentives in place so that the industry delivers the connectivity. Then you just have to manage the demand side, and there are many tried and tested ways of doing so.
In terms of general education, what would you think would be the priorities for universities in the different countries to prepare these young people to join this revolution?
I think the young people take to it naturally, and I think once they have their first experience of digital technology, they want more, because it's kind of addictive.
Finally, what would be Ericsson's message to regulators and the industry in the region to enhance connectivity?
Well, we're ready to speed up Latin America with our 5G solutions, and we think regulators should get on board and create the incentives for the operators to deliver this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.